So let's see a sample code to build a simple data-driven framework for a particular case. Now, if you see on the screen, this is a code which is implementing a simple data-driven framework, wherein the code is over here and the data is independent of the code, and we are supplying different data values for the same script using parameterization. We have parameterized here the username and password, and we are using the same we are using different sets of data for the same script. So starting with we are opening the application using systemutil.run. After that, if you see, I'm using data table.value operation to pick the values from my data table. Now in this case, what we have done is I've directly imported the data file using sheet import from file. So I imported it from the file system directly into the data table. There can be other cases wherein the sheet will be available at some other location. So you know how to do that, right? So for our case, I'm using this. I've already imported I've already imported the data in my data table. So what it does is the script simply adds the data table and value for different values of username and password. Now one thing you'll notice that the script is accepting only one line of data, that is set data table dot value username and password. There's no loop over here. It's just accepting the first Shankar and Mercury, the first agent name and password, and then it will perform the operation, that is click on OK, and it will verify whether the next screen exists or not. And if it is the next screen is not existing, reporter.report event will say that the script has failed and the login is unsuccessful, else it will throw pass result. So all this you are aware of. This is a simple piece of code where we are verifying whether the login is happening successfully or not. But here the only problem is we can only access the first line of data. What about the other lines? So to access the other lines, we'll put a loop over here. Okay, so using data table dot get row count and putting it in a variable. So we'll get the row count of the variable of the data table. Now remember guys, data table dot get row count by default takes the row count of the global data table. Okay, global data sheet. In case you want to you're working on the local data sheet, that is action 1 for your particular action, then you need to use data table dot get sheet, and you need to inform QTP that I want the row count from my particular sheet. Okay, so this is the code for that. But in our case, since we are working on the global data table, we do not need global sheet, we do not need to use get sheet property. Okay, so I row count equal to, now once we get the row count, that is the row count will be 3 in our case, I just need to use the for loop. The for loop will also cover the launch of the application, since we are closing it at the end, so we need to launch at the beginning. Okay, so for I equal to, so we are starting with the first row, that is I equal to 1 to I row count. Okay, so now the script should work fine for this code. And this was a very simple example of implementing data-driven framework for your application. Now we need to make a lot of improvisation on this. Okay, and I'll show you how. Now this was only about one script. Now imagine that you have 20 test cases and you have to decide you have 20 test cases and you have 20 different data set for different test cases. So in that case you need to decide on how to use how the data sheet format should be. So by improvising your script, I mean to say that just imagine, say for example, you have 20 different test cases, and you need to decide how you want to save your data sheet. So the different possibilities are suppose for 20 different test cases, I have all the entire data sheet is in the same sheet. The entire data is in the same sheet. Okay, so one single sheet will have the all the data for 20 test cases. The second possibility is we can have different sheets for different cases. So 20 different sheets for 20 cases. Or the third possibility is we can have 20 different workbooks for 20 test cases. So why I'm stressing on this is because once the framework is designed, it becomes very difficult to change it. So you have to be very careful while choosing which frame, what is the format, what is the way in which you want to fetch the input from the datasheet. So I'll explain you the different ways and why you need to choose that for fetching the values from the datasheet. Now consider this case. I have three test cases which has data requirements, that is user ID, password, and URL. The purpose is to log into Gmail and open the first email box, email from inbox. And for Yahoo, it is log into Yahoo Mail and open the mail whose subject matches the one given in datasheet. Okay. And the third is log into Facebook and open a friend's wall. Okay. The friend's name should be taken from datasheet. So in all the three cases, if you see the basic requirement is URL, user ID, and password. Okay. And for Yahoo, there'll be one more requirement, that is the email subject, whereas for Facebook, it's the friend's name. So as you can see, this is a very classical case of wherein we can use the data sheet, use the data in a single sheet for all the test cases. So I'll explain you why this is good. So if you see over here, the test case, these are the different test cases, the three test cases, one for Gmail, one for Yahoo, and one for Facebook. So as you can see, only 5 columns are needed for the data, and the first 3 columns, that is URL, username, and password, is needed by all of them, whereas the email subject is used by only Yahoo Mail, and FB search is used by only Facebook. So we do not have many columns in this. So this case is ideal because out of 5, 3 columns are used by all of the cases. Suppose imagine we have fourth case which needs 7 columns or 10 columns, right? So this fourth test case needs 10 columns, and if you see the rest of the columns will be blank for the other test cases. So in that case, it is not feasible to use this single sheet for data for all the test cases, because it will unnecessarily increase the number of columns. Although it is not used for Gmail, Yahoo, or Facebook, it is only used for fourth test case, which needs 10 columns, and unnecessarily we are adding the columns for our other test cases as well. So it should be avoided in that case. The second reason is I do not have many test cases in my project. For example, in this project I have just 3 test cases, so the number of rows are very less. So in that case, it's a good practice to use the test cases to use the data in a single sheet. So the bottom line is, if you have less number of columns which are uncommon, in our case only 2 columns are uncommon, the rest 3, the URL, username, and password, are used by all the 3 websites, all the 3 cases. So if you have a less number of uncommon columns, then we can go for using the data in a single sheet. And the second criteria would be less number of test cases. So why I'm saying this? Because it's easy to maintain in a single sheet. Now the advantage of this is it will be easy for us to fetch the values from a single sheet. So the coding of the script will be easy because all the test cases are fetching the value from a single sheet. So that is the advantage. The disadvantage of this is if in future we need to add more test cases which will have which won't fit the criteria. In that case, it will be difficult to maintain the framework. So it all depends on the requirement, what kind of requirement we have. We choose the kind of format which we need to follow for fetching the value from the data sheet.